asked most CRO agencies what they do, and they will say, we run experiments to improve your conversion funnel. Great. But what does that actually mean? What is it that your money is actually spent on? And what does a Monday morning look like? So in this video, I'll take you through the exact process, what happens from the moment you sign to the moment you see your first test results. And there's actually one step most CRO agencies skip, and that is why some clients don't see the results. I will get into that within a few minutes. Here's why this matters. Most stores hire a CRO agency and judge them just on the conversion rate. This is definitely the goal in mind, and that should go up, but it takes time and variance to get there. So instead of judging your agency after 6 months when you already spent the budget, there is something you can evaluate from the exact start. You want to make sure that they follow a certain steps in the right order. Getting results without a strict process becomes luck. But if you have a very good setup, even though if it's a bit slower, the results will compound in the long run and make sure that you generate a very good ROI on the investment on this agency. The process has 5 phases. The first one is research and data foundation. This is basically where you make sure you have all the data for the next stage, which is research. This is where you define all your learnings and all the problems that you're trying to solve. The next one is building the hypotheses. This is probably where you define how do I prioritize the tests that I want to run. Fourth, design, develop, and QA. And then lastly is actually running the test, learning from it, and then feeding the learnings back into the cycle. Step 4 and 5 basically are a continuous loop. You first define the problem and then you iterate and iterate on the solution that you've implemented until you've had a very good winner. Let's go through each one by one, and I'll show you exactly why there's a difference between a lazy agency and an agency that really tries to give you results. Phase 1, data and tracking foundation. This is what you will focus on in week 1 and week 2, because if you don't have the right data, all the decisions made are basically noise. You want to make sure that the attribution is right, that the events are not being counted twice, that the amount of purchases matches with your backend. Every data point that will be used in the analysis must be nearly perfect. Because of course, if you're making decisions on all this data and the data is wrong, your decisions will be wrong. So it's definitely worth it to spend the time to make sure that the foundation is right before you go to the next phase. So a lazy agency would basically go from assumptions and not rely on the actual performance of your funnel. They wouldn't look at the specific funnel steps where users are dropping off or some attribution that isn't performing like it should be. There's a very important distinction between a good and a bad agency, and taking the slower route will get you the furthest. Phase 2, research. This is where the real thinking starts to happen. And this is where you use the data you've collected to actually come up with these issues, right? So you look at the page performance, which pages do better than others. Are there certain product categories or products that are very important and that are underperforming? You look at the traffic acquisition. Of course, Facebook will behave very differently than Google Ads traffic because Google Ads has a much higher intent. They might know what they're searching for. But traffic from Meta is just scrolling through Dan Bilzerian's videos and all of a sudden sees your ad. These people are not educated enough. So perhaps you can treat these customers and use it on your site very differently. You can look at the device breakdown. What's the difference between the performance on mobile versus desktop? And the list goes on. All these minor details really help you sum up and get a good understanding of where the problem lies. But it's not yet what the problem is. And that is the second phase of this research phase. Qualitative research. Another thing that a lot of lazy agencies would skip, but this is so important because collecting GA4 data is very easy. It helps you see where the problem is. But qualitative data actually helps you understand why this problem occurs. So as an example, you could see that 70% of the people reach the product page but don't add to cart. It's a big problem to solve. But why? If you look at heat maps, screen recordings. You can even hire people to go through the site and tell you exactly what they see and what they struggle with. Look at the reviews from the store. Look at customer support tickets. All this qualitative data, often shown in words or recordings, helps you understand that the site guide might be confusing. You can see people are rage clicking. They're trying to figure out why something is not working. And that helps you understand where the problem is, but now also why that problem happens. And now it becomes very specific and very easy to build your hypotheses and your prioritization list, because the data is basically 80% of the work. It helps you understand what you need to do next. Now, collecting this qualitative data is certainly more difficult, but it's definitely very valuable for your research. Now, there are two ways to kind of do this that I want to highlight today. One is customer interviews. It is so valuable to just sit across the table of one of your customers and they tell you exactly what their experience is like on your store. It gives you insights of things you couldn't have thought about. But an even easier one is just have a very small pop-up on your screen. It doesn't have to be appearing in the middle of the screen, but just at the bottom. Most people wouldn't even see it. And you can only make it appear if someone has spent, let's say, more than a minute on the page. So only for the users that are more likely to struggle to find what they're looking for. And you could ask things like, what is holding you back today from making that purchase? You can give them an open question or even a multi-choice question to make them click more often. And it gives you so many insights, things you wouldn't have thought about. It allows you to do this on a bigger scale. Of course, this takes time if it hasn't been set up before. So once an agency starts, often what we do is we just set it up, we continue, and in a month or so, we go through the learnings and implement it in our next roadmap. Phase 3. Hypothesis building and prioritization. Now, from all that research that you've done, you probably have more issues that you could ever test in a whole year. So now you need to define which ones are your most important to tackle and then write the hypotheses for these. A normal good hypothesis has the change required, the expected result, and the reason why. So for example, we believe that by adding a better size guide above the fold on the product page, we expect an increase in the conversion rate because customers are currently struggling choosing the right size. So this already specifies what needs to be done and the expected result. And this is crucial because if you do this for a very long list of tests, you still need to figure out what we should do first. And that's kind of the second step here, which is prioritization. There are multiple models out there that you can use. One is called ICE, that looks at like the confidence and the ease and the impact of a test. There's one called CLX. I won't go into those, but you can look them up. It basically helps you to rank the order of the tests that you're planning to do. The objective here is to be as objective as possible, right? So you don't want to include any opinions in here. Changing a button is easy, but doesn't do anything. So therefore you wouldn't want to do it first. So you want to stick with one that's very important and ideally as easy to implement as possible. For you as a store, the roadmap is basically something you should own. So definitely ask for it because this is what will your money be spent on in the next months to come. And it's very important that the agency you work with has really thought about what you will spend your money on because time cannot be turned back. And every lost opportunity is a lower conversion rate, which makes it more difficult to run your ads and to grow your business. So it's crucial that you own that roadmap and you even build it together with that agency so both parties are completely on board with this for the next few months. Now, phase 4. This is where you design, develop, and QA your tests. This is kind of the exciting part. So basically what happens here is in the design phase, currently, especially with AI, this is where a lot of the strategy actually gets implemented. The development and QA is basically a result of the design. So the designer is such a crucial role in this whole team and this process. Because if the design is wrong, the test will fail. And I'm not only talking about if the design looks good, it's really about the functionality, the way you copyright, the way you persuade the customer. So the design is really a crucial part here. So the design could include multiple variants, could be one variant, and you test it against a control after it gets developed and QA, right? The development generally happens inside an external tool. So often the code is not written in Shopify or WordPress on your site, which allows you to move a lot quicker. So if something breaks, the test can just be turned off and the site is not affected by it. And this also allows you to work with a developer that only needs access to this third-party tool. Could be VWO, could be Convert. These are just many of the A/B test tools out there. Now, before you push live, it's important that the agency reviews that the tracking of the test is actually correct. If it's on Shopify, most tools automatically integrate so that the performance of the test basically comes in directly and accurately. But you often want to figure out smaller engagements too. So let's say you've changed the collection page, you made a slider of the images on each of the product cards. This is not a default event to be tracked, but it's still very important to track this either in GA4 or even in the A/B testing tool itself. So therefore, you can actually see 5% of the people actually use this, while the test says the conversion rate has improved with 20%. It's a little bit out of proportion, and it helps you kind of understand if something worked or didn't work, why it was like that. And then it helps you iterate to find a winning solution. Now we're getting into the good stuff. Now we're actually running these tests. We're collecting data, and the A/B testing tool generally splits the current version with the new version. So if you run one variant, there are two, the control and the variant, and both might see 50%. This tool automatically divides the traffic, and therefore it's able to compare which of the two is better. If you run multiple variants, of course, it will split it, let's say in 3 or in 4. But the more variants you have, the longer the test will take and the more data you will need. These A/B testing tools collect all the data and should give you the option to analyze it by breaking it down by device, by returning or new users, by the traffic source, and that all helps you understand what problem you're actually solving, or if you're not. You might get promised the world, but it's just the harsh truth that not all the tests will be winners. Generally, it's even less than half of the tests. Especially if you're running at a high velocity of testing, it's very normal that tests fail, but it's part of the game. So the more fails you have, more likely the more wins you will have too, if you run many tests. That makes the speed of the agency you work with very important, especially from day one. You don't want to sit and wait for 2 months before the first test is live. Ideally, you run as many tests as you can to find as many winners. And of course, the quality is important, but at a high quality, you also want a high velocity. Now let's talk about the reporting of these tests. A lot of lazy agencies will just share a screenshot of the testing results, but there's so much more to understand from the actual data. If it's a winning test, why did this become a winner? And also if it's a losing test, what is it that we learn from it and that we can use to iterate and to create a new version? You don't want to forget about losing tests. If the problem is real, but the solution wasn't right, you need a new solution. And that is totally fine. You can iterate, you can run multiple variants to figure out what is the best solution for that problem. The problem remains. So the reporting has to be very, very clear, also towards you. So if you stop working with the agency, then of course you can still continue the work to improve the conversion rate. Whether it's internally with another agency, you don't want to invent the wheel again and do all the tests again. Here's what a realistic roadmap could look like. So within the first 2 weeks, the agency you work with should have a very good understanding already about your customers, your business, the market, and the actual data that you already had, including quantitative and qualitative data. So the research phase should basically end within 1 or 2 weeks. Of course, the data might not be complete. Maybe new things have been set up and they take time to collect data. But after 2 weeks, you should expect the first tests coming in. These don't have to be major tests yet, but while we're working on more significant tests, small minor tests could go live already. These might not get the best results, but at least we're making use of our time and have something live. I think after 1 month, the roadmap should almost be set in stone. We should already have some small learnings from the site to understand how receptive the customers are to changes. And after 1 month, version 1 should be set in stone. Now you still don't have the actual testing result, which might still be taking another month, to be very gracious. After 2 months, all the data should be incredibly clear. The agency should be well up to speed, and you should already see some green numbers in your A/B testing report. Now, after month 2, it basically becomes implementing that roadmap, learning from the tests, and then adjusting the roadmap for what's to come. With that expected timeline, you should have a very solid setup, and time-wise, be up for success. While working with an agency, there are a few things that you could expect every single month. So here's a very quick checklist. So every month you should at least be on a call with them to understand what is currently being worked on, what are the testing learnings and possibly even winners, and what is the hypotheses that we're tackling next. Just the next 4 or 5. So you always know what has been done and what is coming up. And then while as a team you're working on this, the backlog of testing ideas basically builds up. The roadmap becomes more a working session, and of course you get clear what you will do coming up. Definitely always make sure you get access to all the reports, all the tools, and definitely the A/B testing tool. You don't want to rely on an agency to judge themselves. An external tool that's fully transparent should judge them based on their performance, and you should have direct access to that data. If you're not getting all of these things every single month from your agency, you might be working with one of these lazy agencies that I've mentioned. And I would definitely urge you to request it. 5 signals that tell whether your agency is going through the process or is going through the motion. The first one is them showing you losing tests. It's very normal to have losing tests. And if they don't have those, they're either cherry picking or they're not running enough tests. Their hypotheses actually reference the data that has been collected. Session recordings, GA4 data, every hypothesis should be backed up by data, not by just best practices. They ask you questions. A disengaged agency doesn't know what's going on and will never understand what's going through the mind of the customer. They should ask you about the customer, the business, about the market. It's their job to understand everything that you know about the business. Or the roadmap must be changing. As the learnings come in, the next priorities change as well. If a static roadmap doesn't change, it means nobody is thinking. Lastly, the 5th one, they push back. A good agency has a good understanding of what it requires to improve your funnel. If they push back, it means that they care about the results more than the relationship. Now you know exactly what a CRO agency should be doing week by week, month by month from the moment you sign the agreement. If you want to know how we run these, I will show you on a link I will leave in the description. This is actually a real client of ours where we started, and after a month I made the video of exactly what has been done, the audit process, prioritization, the test that we already run, and even some of the early results that came in. If you're looking for a CRO agency, definitely click the link down below and then I'll see you there.